Oh,
Hi,
hi, Chelsea.
does that work?
Yeah,
Oh,
that's it.
hi, how's it going?
I'm good. I'm John.
Hi, John, nice to meet you.
You as well. We are recording. Wanted to let you know. I'm sure they briefed you on that, but
Okay, great.
and so I think someone from Align is supposed to join. But how's it? Are you in LA right now?
I'm actually in Santa Barbara right now just for the weekend or whatever the week, I guess. But we can go ahead and start. They'll hop on. Don't worry
Okay.
about it. Yeah.
So as a comedian, do your like weeks and weekends kind of blur?
I mean, between COVID and my lifestyle, I don't know what month we're in or what season.
Funny. So your tour is called Horny and Vaccinated. Um,
No, it's called vaccinated and horny. You have to get
oh, geez.
vaccinated before you can
Okay.
legitimize your horniness.
Okay. So vaccinated and horny. Could you walk me through that title beyond the shock value of that? And did you have to pitch that to anyone? Like, did you have to go into a boardroom and be like, no, it's vaccinated and horny?
No, I have nothing to do with boardrooms. I just do whatever I, feel like doing. And vaccinated and horny was actually a title one of my girlfriends from Whistler came up with. And I didn't tell her I had chosen it. So then when I announced my tour, she's like, "Hey, you picked my name. I came up with vaccinated and horny." I go, "You did?" I'd completely forgotten, of course. But no, I think it's just kind of, I want this to just be a joyous tour and bring life and laughter. And, I want to be the reason people are coming back together for the first time. And I feel a lot of people are ready to rumble, in a sexual way also. So why not just include that? Because a lot of us are really
Yeah.
sexually frustrated, especially those of us who have remained single and alone, childless and alone as an intention in life. The pandemic was like a real whoopsie doodle. First of all, I was patting myself on the back, for not having had children and having to say the words like homeschooling or even participate in that. But at the same time, I was like, well, it would be much easier if I had a husband around. It's not easy to meet
Right.
people during a pandemic and trust that they're behaving in an appropriate way that makes you feel safe.
So you've talked a lot about de-bitching yourself and going to therapy and smoking weed and meditating. And so we're sort of being introduced to this kinder, gentler Chelsea, as well in your HBO Max special. Can you talk about what people will expect from this tour? Will it be unlike anything you've ever done before? Will we still get the Chelsea we know and love, or is this sort of a new version of yourself?
Well, I mean, it is kind of like a Chelsea 2.0, but I mean, it's stand up is stand up. My evolution special was really about the experience I had during therapy, and I wanted to do something profoundly meaningful within the medium of a stand up special. So when I did my most recent special for HBO Max last year, I really wanted to come back to stand up in a way that had meaning for me. And by telling my story and about, that whole special was just a way for me to say something in this forum that had impact and to not feel I think in the past I'd felt like it had been weightless, just cracking jokes, cracking jokes, cracking jokes. Now, I'm in a different space too. It's like there's always an evolution happening. It's like you want to get back to rowdy and being bad and
Mm-hmm.
saying naughty things. Like that's who I am. So yeah, I want to bring that to the fore. And I want to remind people like how idiotic we all behaved during this pandemic and how embarrassing our behavior was and how silly and small we became and how easily it was to tell how big the world was and how anything that affects one of us affects all of us. So those are all themes, like kind of human themes that you bring it to it with you wherever you go. But yeah, the number one role of being a stand-up comedian is to make people fucking laugh.
Good, good. And so, had you been existential before COVID, or is this sort of a new, being alone with yourself, you really realized that, oh shit, like I'm just, as Sarah Silverman says, a speck on a speck on a speck.
Yeah, well, I think that I mean I gained a lot of that self-awareness during therapy. That's what you're basically paying for, the transaction of self-awareness. You're paying somebody to tell you what's wrong with you and what your shortcomings are. So that was a yeah. I mean, I've learned for a long time that my epicenter is not the world's epicenter. My life is not the center of the universe, but sometimes it does feel that way for all people. I can understand. Um, So, that's why I try not to stay in LA for too many months consecutively before I lose my mind, and then you get your head so far up your ass, you don't know whose ass is where.
And so with your podcast and with this tour and with your last sort of docu-series, you've sort of been gravitating towards normal people in a way, non-celebrity interviews. And do you feel like with the sort of self-awareness you have with therapy, do you ever want to just be a normal person again and not sort of have the celebrity that you have now?
I mean, I like my celebrity. It's the perfect mix. I don't get harassed. Well, I mean, I get harassed online, but who doesn't?
Right.
I could take that. No problem. That's like a day at the beach, No, wait, what was the question? I don't want to veer too off course.
No,
Sometimes I do that.
So the sort of, you've been talking to normal people for your last, few projects.
Oh, right.
Right.
Yeah. I think for me, I'm just always more compelled, Dear Chelsea, my podcast is all about talking to normal people because I really just wanted to talk to normal people. I like regular people. I like dynamics and sibling dynamics and family dynamics and interpersonal relationships. And I like to be, kind of like your big sister or your best friend that's going to give you a kick in the ass and tell you to go for it when you're too scared to make that jump yourself. Right. So that's what I like to do. And that's kind of, for me, yeah, I mean, I kind of burned myself out on the celebrity culture for so many years. I just don't care, I don't want to. And now we're in a different time. It's like making fun of celebrities doesn't end well. We learned that the hard way. Look at poor Britney Spears, So we need to let those little kids be kids and let celebrities just make asses of themselves on their own.
And so thinking about sort of, I listened to your Sway interview, and Kara, I believe her name, asked you about Britney Spears, and Sarah Silverman had just recently apologized to Paris Hilton, I believe. And do you think with cancel culture and everything that, no, you need to mess up, you need to make mistakes, you need to almost get canceled to learn? Or do you wish that you could go back and not make fun of those people and not have those mistakes?
No, I think mistakes are, very fruitful to become the person that you're going to be, without those mistakes and without learning, there's no learning curve. You have to learn that something isn't appropriate and you learn and you accept it. And then and then how do you apply it? Right. There's all these steps to being made aware of a situation, then applying it to the way that you're going to act in the world and then maintaining it. So, yeah, no, I wouldn't take anything away. I mean, I think everyone has come to grips with the fact that things have gotten, really insensitive and people's feelings weren't being considered. And I think as any human being learns that, then you're going to be reacting a little bit differently and operating a little bit differently in this world.
And so do you think comedy will change or is changing sort of with this reckoning, not only with celebrity culture, but with equality and injustice? And do you think some comics will be left behind?
Well, yeah, I mean, some comics are being left behind, but yeah, I think it's a new era. I like the challenge of having parameters. I like being told you can't do this, you can't say that. Good. Then I'll have to get more clever. And that's how we should all be thinking. And yeah, some people will get left behind, but those people were probably already too far behind to begin with.
Mm-hmm. And so as a white woman, sort of talking about injustice and privilege and things like that, that's sort of been in the past few years your forte. Why do you think it's important for you to speak up on these matters?
Well, I just think, listen, if you have I think it's important for anyone to stick up. It doesn't matter if you're a celebrity or you have a small platform, or you have a huge one. It's about actually committing to acts of service for other people that aren't just about yourself. I grew up in this world as a white, pretty woman whose life, it was pretty easy to become famous and become a celebrity and become a stand-up comedian that was successful. It was pretty easy. Yeah, it was tough work for me at the time, thinking in my own narrow purview. But when you look at the larger scope of things and you're like, wow, I had every advantage in the world to make my dreams come true. And what is it like for somebody who doesn't have every advantage in the world? And what are you going to do about it?
Cool. And so moving back to your tour, I'm sort of interested, Florida is very scary right now. I sort of walk out of the house and I'm like, I'm going to die. More than usual. There's always that edge of you're going to die in the state. But what are how has COVID changed the way you're touring? Is it a bus situation? Are you flying in, flying out? What does sort of your day on tour look like now?
Well, we fly into the big cities and then I think we're going to be taking buses in between the cities. Once we go into like, I do 3 shows a weekend or 4, depending. And we just, yeah. So I think we'll keep it. We have to keep it pretty tight on the road. You can't screw around with this. You don't want to be the show that spread COVID or had a huge outbreak. That's not kosher for me. So you want to avoid that at all costs, obviously. And yeah, we'll be doing all of the things: planes, trains, and automobiles.
Awesome. And do you have any like tour horror stories? Like if you could pinpoint like the worst thing that's ever happened to you on the road?
Oh, I mean, yes, oh God, the worst thing that's ever happened to me on the road. I mean, I was once performing in New Zealand, in Auckland. I was doing a big concert in Auckland, and I had a guy come meet me. And once I thought that I was going to like him, and when he showed up, I couldn't believe his outfit, and I couldn't go through with anything. And I spent the next 4 hours in Auckland trying to ditch this guy, and I couldn't. And just because I couldn't just be forthright and say I'm not interested, like I just kept trying to get rid of him, get rid of him, get rid of him. And I remember waking up in the morning and saying to my assistant at the time, I'm never lying again. And so that was really arduous. I mean, if I had just said, listen, I'm not that into you, I could have really saved everybody some time.
Do you look back at moments in your life as you now and you're like, shit, if I had just done that one thing, had I just known, or if I was myself then that I am now? Like, do you have those moments a lot?
If I was myself, no, I mean, I don't have a lot of regret. I don't look back and beat myself up. I'm not in the shame game. I'm into moving forward and being in the present moment. And, just, yeah, if you screw up and you look, I mean, listen, we all look back at our past behavior and can be horrified. That's a simple task. The real challenge is to look at yourself and go, oh, you were just a little girl. You didn't know any better, or you just were insecure, or you were scared. And now I know, like, oh, instead of being shameful or embarrassed about my past behavior, I feel sorry for like that little girl. I'm like, oh, you didn't know yet,
Yeah. And so this type of enlightenment, you've sort of narrowed it down to therapy, weed, and meditating. So
yeah, cannabis being my gateway drug to meditation.
Right. So I was going to ask you, which one came first and how did they all follow?
Well, I tried to meditate and I couldn't get it going, like I kept doing these kind of dual meditations with my psychiatrist. He would sit with me and it was just all so corny. And I just was like, oh, this is exactly what I thought meditation was going to be. He'd be like, I want you to feel your body and then go down to, feel your hips and I was just like, this is not my entry point. I'm a cynic. So I need to be as practical and pragmatic as possible. Like I need Headspace or Calm or one of those easy to use apps. But anyway, once I started, once California became, it legalized cannabis, all the educative components that had been missing this whole time were right there in black and white. So you're not dosing anyone or getting dosed. You're actually taking something that's, what you're taking. And a microdose is a whole different ballgame than taking a cookie from somebody, at Burning Man. It's a much different kind of, I think. For me, it helps me kind of actually really have a lot of patience. So for meditation, it was the way, once I started smoking weed, I was like, oh, I could actually sit still for 20 minutes and just try and think of, my breathing and so that's kind of how it started. So it was therapy, then it was cannabis, and then came meditation.
And how do you stop yourself from thinking? Because you seem like you think all the time, and that's not in a bad way. How do you, how forced does it have to be? How long does it take to get into that zone?
Which zone?
Like a meditation, like I'm just going to be.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I usually sometimes it doesn't feel great. Sometimes you're sitting there and your head is running around like crazy and you're thinking about a million different things. And then there's the day where you forget you're meditating and you feel what everyone talks about and this like kind of light energy. and then all of a sudden the bell goes off and you're like, oh, okay, that was a meditation. And if you get that once every 14 times, I think that's a good track record.
And so do you have like an interview weed, like go on camera weed, friend, I'm gonna hang out with friends weed, like I'm gonna be alone weed?
I go through phases. Like sometimes I'll smoke joints for a couple weeks, then I move on, then I go, okay, take a break from smoking. Then I'll have edibles for a couple weeks. But I get so many different cannabis brands sending me stuff that I have just like a house full of samples. So I mean, it's really hard not to use the cannabis when it's everywhere. You know what I mean?
And you've also talked a lot about cannabis reform. And one thing that sticks in my mind is your boyfriend growing up getting arrested for having cannabis on him. Why is it, important for you to talk about that as you're sort of a connoisseur of this? And do you think as legalization happens across the country that it needs to be a bigger conversation about not just legalization, but also expunging records?
Well, it's not, expunging records and decarceration, right? And it's about everybody who's in the cannabis industry supporting the Marshall Project or the Sentencing Project or any of these organizations that work closely with decarceration, with decarcerating people that have been in, there are people that have been in jail for 10 or 20 years for a dime bag. Much like the story about my ex-boyfriend and me in the documentary, my Netflix documentary, Hello Privilege, It's Me, Chelsea. So it would be great if all of these people, like we're doing it with because I'm going to launch a cannabis brand at some point. And we've been working on it for a couple of years, but obviously for me, it's mandatory that a portion of those proceeds will go to those organizations and everyone in the cannabis industry, because these are all huge Silicon Valley tech guys getting involved. Like that should be a mandate for every cannabis company moving forward. They should be profit sharing with getting people out of jail. So I mean, for the purpose of getting people out of jail, I should say. So I feel very passionately about putting your, money where your mouth is in that instance, especially because it's just too unfair to look at that contrast of how many people sit in prison and that cannabis is now becoming legal across the country.
And so I think over the last 4 years, we were just getting this onslaught of ridiculousness coming from Washington and trauma. And that was where we put a lot of our anger. And now that that is gone, what are you thinking about? What is getting you up? What are your passion projects that you're like, okay, this is what I'm going to be angry about now. This is what I'm going to focus on now.
Well, I mean, voting is obviously anger making, and the way that Republicans handle losing an election is really upsetting. And, democracy being on the line is upsetting. I try to just be grateful for the things that are not bad anymore, like having to see Donald Trump's face on a regular basis, or having to hear him talk, or see a tweet about his. I don't watch the news anymore. I've kind of removed myself from the unhappy addiction of Donald Trump, that car crash. And I feel a lot lighter because of it. I didn't realize how much I was poisoning my system by engaging with it. But it was like, the monster's inside the house and you're just kind of always looking over your shoulder. So, I mean, but voting, I want people to be able to vote. That's what democracy is. That's the definition of democracy.
And so there's not going to be a lot of mention of Trump or politics on the tour. You're kind of leaving that.
No, I'm taking a break from politics, and okay. I think everybody will be happy to hear that.
Awesome. And so sort of thinking about this tour and thinking about your podcast special, what is next in the Chelsea pipeline? You've got this cannabis brand, you've got this podcast, you've got this tour. What is going to be next? Do you know?
We're developing a show based on my most recent book, Life Will Be the Death of Me. We're developing that for TV, which I will star in. So that's really exciting. And I'm ready to act as myself in one of my books. So I'm really looking forward to that. I've paired up with a great writer, and my tour is going to be going on for the next year. So I'm just going to be bouncing around the country and getting this new 1 hour special together, and remaining vaccinated and horny, I guess.
And do you think you gravitated towards talk show sort of hosting originally because you could be yourself, that you didn't want to act as a character? Or do you think that was kind of a character?
No, that was who I was. It wasn't really a character. It was just kind of, I got rewarded for my bad behavior, like glorifying drink. I mean, not bad behavior. I don't think it's bad, but a lot of people do. They're like, oh, but drinking, smoking, talking about sex, writing books about sex. People were like, oh, wow, but that's who I am. And so, that's what I was doing. And I'm always very honest about what's going on with me. So whenever I have new information, I'm the first person to share it.
Right. And well, what's interesting though is what you were doing is what men had been doing for so long. And so do you view the way you are viewed, which is almost always through the male gaze, as a reason that you do what you do?
Yeah, I mean, I like the fact that people get upset with things that I do because it's a commentary on our culture and what's appropriate. I mean, the whole topless thing is because it is just, but it's so ridiculous that men are allowed to run around with their fat bodies flapping in the wind, disgusting, topless, and we who are beautiful, who have beautiful breasts, it's like it's against. I mean, when you start to think about the structures of our society, which have been brought to the fore so many times in the last 2 to 4 years, we start to understand like, oh, okay, so the rules apply to one section of people and not another section. So yeah, that's a motivator for me to just kind of piss people off and go, no, I'm not okay with this. I am going to talk about abortions, okay? Because that's a real thing that women have to deal with. I am going to talk about things that you're telling me make me either crass or, I've had all these words, pejorative words to describe me. And it's like, exactly, if a man was saying half of these things, no one would care.
Right. And do you think that as you continue to do both stand up and more women continue to do stand up, that the sort of dynamics of comedy will change? I know it probably gets so annoyed to be asked what's it like to be a woman in comedy, but do you think that the dynamics have changed over your career and that they'll continue to change?
I think women now are out for each other, in a good way. Like we are there for each other. We understand what we're up against and that this has been a male dominated thing for so long, not just in female comedy, but in the world. Everything's male dominated. What isn't? Women's basketball is male dominated. It's like, what? So it's about being, there's a certain sense of togetherness among women that I haven't experienced before. I mean, I've experienced it in my personal life, but on this level where women are like, I think Reese Witherspoon said this to me recently. She's like, when social media came on the scene, like women realized we had a way to connect and a way to be like, oh, no, I'm on your team. I'm on your side. I'm going to root for you. Where before we just thought there was only room for a couple of us. So we were fighting against each other. And now we understand like, okay, when, high tide rises all the ships, let's get everybody up there.
Awesome. And so I've got a few lightning round questions for you. I don't know if they brought these to you beforehand.
No, they didn't. Go ahead, though. I'm good with lightning rounds.
All right. So Aperol Spritz or vodka soda?
Oh, well, right now an Aperol Spritz.
Okay. Indica or sativa?
Sativa.
Okay. Moderna or Pfizer?
Moderna.
Would you get a third shot?
I would, yeah. I'd get 5 shots. I don't care. I love shots.
But they're both owned by NBC Universal, so don't worry. But E or Bravo?
Well, I guess I should choose my home base, which is E. That's my OG home base.
And then Bachelor or Bachelorette?
Neither. I fucking hate reality television.
That's so interesting because you were on E, but you hate reality TV?
Well, why do you think I'm not there anymore?
So do you choose your networks? Because I mean, now you're mostly on streaming. Do you choose your networks based off of the content you're going to be adjacent to?
Well, you go and you pitch to a bunch of networks and you basically go with whoever gives you the best deal. Okay. So that can be a factor if you have multiple offers for a project, but usually, typically speaking, you sell a project and, whoever gives you the best deal, whoever's the best vision for it, whoever you want to work with the most is where you end up. So you can choose to pitch to the places you like, but you can't guarantee that they're going to buy it.
Cool. And then is there anything that I did not talk about that you want to bring up about the tour, that you want people to know, that you woke up and thought about this morning?
No, I think that's good. I think we covered a lot.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for talking.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks.